Coming up on the show, we're going to find out how technology and social media are being used in church. That's next.
This is the Point and Click podcast with your host, Mark Yapchak.
And thank you for joining me for the show. Now, technology and social media has really changed the way we communicate as a society, and it's no different in the Catholic Church. I had the chance earlier this week to talk with Chancellor and Communications Director for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Syracuse. Danielle Cummings is going to talk with us about how the diocese is using social media to stay engaged and connected with its parish community. What is your role here at the diocese?
Sure. Well, one or all of them. No, I'm just kidding. I am the Chancellor and Director of Communications for the Roman Catholic Diocese. And so your next question might be, what the heck is a chancellor?
Yeah.
Which is usually what people say. I break it down under canon law, which is the law of the Catholic Church. The definition of it is that I'm the notary of the diocese. I am the one who's responsible for records, if you will. And that's probably not at all what is my primary role here in the diocese. So as chancellor, I work very closely and assist the bishop, frankly, in the overall administration of the diocese. And people don't understand, or they don't have an idea of what a diocese is, besides being a funny word that people can't say. We're 7 counties. And a diocese is a territory that is overseen by a bishop and is made up of communities of faith that are put in place to spread the news, the good news of the Catholic Church, good news of our belief system, the good news of Jesus Christ. So that's what we do. And so for all of that, that could be from a day-to-day idea of what I do. It's a lot of meetings and meeting with our constituents, who are, the faithful, or people who have left the church, or people who are coming into the church. It's our clergy, it's our school teachers, it's, the gamut it's across the whole gamut. And we have a pretty big footprint.
I was going to ask you about that. I oftentimes, when I'm filling out a survey or something and it has something to do with my career field, they always ask the question, how many people work in your organization? How many people are there in the Syracuse Diocese, and is that inclusive of the parishes themselves or just strictly diocese employees?
So if you're talking about how many people are in the diocese, so that those are people that we would count as our faithful. So again, we're 7 counties. Right now, we put the number of about 195,000 Catholics.
Wow.
And those are people who typically are registered in a parish. So parishes give us a census of who belongs in their parish. And we actually report those numbers every year to the Vatican. So so about 195,000. The diocesan campus, which are these 3 buildings in Syracuse, New York, here, as employed, are about 102 individuals. But across the board, which includes Catholic Charities, our schools, our parishes, all of those, we're close to 5,000 employees. So we're actually one of the major employers.
I've been underestimating.
Yes, and people
I said over 2,000. I'm thinking, 2,000 sounds like a lot of people, but 5,000. And that's, do employees within the parishes themselves fall under the auspices of the diocese?
They do.
So they are technically employees of the diocese?
Yeah, they are parish employees, but it's within the diocesan system. Same as Catholic Charities and our Catholic schools and so forth. So, and we have hundreds of parishes, 116 parishes, 21 schools.
Wow.
There's 6 Catholic charity entities, and we're on campuses and campus ministry. Really, it's a large footprint.
Wow.
It's pretty impressive.
Well, that's amazing. And I know the listeners are going to wonder, well, what is the connection with the diocese and technology as such, whether it be computers, social media, internet? My question was basically, how has technology or social media impacted the way that the diocese or parishes communicate with their parishioners or with the community?
We couldn't do it without it. So, you go by what Jesus did over 2,000 years ago.
Right.
What did he do? He used the media of the time. And at that time, it was telling parables, right? Storytelling, and being one-on-one with the people. Well, we have to follow that model. So we're now in 2024. And of course, we're one-on-one with individuals and churches and so forth. But technology allows us to be in people's homes, to be in their cars, to be all sorts of, to be wherever they are when they want to tune in. And have a little inspiration, have a spiritual boost, to participate in the Mass, any of those things. And it's interesting. So I've been here over 26 years. Started as Director of Communications, still Director of Communications now, but along with being Chancellor. And I remember in this very office, I was actually pregnant at the time, when we were embarking on a first website. Giving birth to a brand new website, right? And having email addresses and all of those things that seemed very foreign. And there was so much fear about it. Particularly about the email addresses and then even voicemail. You know, when I started, it was with Bishop Moynihan.
Wow.
And he came from Rochester, but he was New York. He was in New York for some time too. And he always said, we will never have voicemail. You will have a human voice on the phone. So you can make sure that you address their concerns and listen to what they have to say and take their message. It took a long time for him to, it did happen in his 12-year term, but it took a while to convince him that, you know, we're not getting away from serving the people, it's just a better way and more efficient way to do it. The same thing with the website. So even trying to gather all that information and to have each of our parishes and schools trust us enough to put their information on, you know, the World Wide Web, right? And then you have the issues that go along with that, making sure the information's right and all those things. So back to your question, how does technology, it allows us to be with them when they want it, the time they want it, and hopefully with the content that they're looking for.
Well, I know, having actually worked through it with the diocese and doing streaming masses, that the pandemic really refocused, I think, the attention on how we can engage and connect with people when we're not physically with them. Yeah. And I think when you talk about technology, that became critical. I know for a fact when I was doing streaming masses and parishes were, or the Catholic, the cathedral was doing weddings and funerals, they wanted family to participate, but they were afraid for them to come to the actual cathedral. Yeah. So we were streaming masses. I might have done maybe a dozen over the course of the first couple of years of the pandemic. That kind of leads to my question is how has technology evolved, I guess, in how the parishes are reaching out? Are they less reluctant to use those new technologies, as you inferred with Bishop Moynihan? Are they more embracing of it?
Yeah, the pandemic was a lot of things for us, right? COVID. But it did force our hand. I think it forced everybody's hand in trying to think quickly, to pivot, and to bring the Mass to the people. So, yeah, I wish I had a number of how many parishes were forward-thinking enough, if you want to say it that way, and before the pandemic to say, let's bring this to people's homes. But the minute we shut down in March, and what amazed me the most is how quickly pastors and parish leadership said, we've got to do something. So it was almost that drop the fear. You know, we're not going to be able to share the faith with people if we don't do this.
Right.
And some were very adaptable and could do it very quickly. And some really struggled, and they tried different formats of just having, believe it or not, a personal phone and doing Facebook Live and, trying those type of things. And then it became a way in which, frankly, our office could be a resource. So our Catholic TV could be a resource to helping people understand how do you stream masses and where do you place it? What do you do with it? And, we were talking off camera before this and saying, believe it or not, there are still people who don't know about YouTube. And right.
It's an educational curve. And I know what kind of occurred to me in the process of preparing for this chat with you is there's a generational shift too going on. I see a lot of new priests are coming in. I'll throw one out there. I know Father probably won't want me to feature him, but Father Celentano does streams. He does, I call him almost like TikTok blurbs, where he'll bring parish up to date on what's going on with his particular parish. But do you notice a shift in focus, a shift in attention away from maybe the old way of thinking about reaching the masses versus maybe the new generation of priests and deacons coming in, embracing this technology and saying, hey, I was raised in the era of social media. To me, it's not foreign, it's not different, it's the way I communicate.
Right.
Are you seeing that transmitting through?
We definitely are seeing that. It's interesting, though, and even with the younger priests who we have, who would be very quick to, if we're doing something promotional, which we do on our social media platforms, or we'll do a reel with a reflection or something. They're always so willing to do, because it's not scary. Put up your phone and do those kind of things. Right. But it's interesting, they join others in trying to determine where's the balance of this, right? So people became so accustomed to not physically leaving their houses and participating in Mass. And so there is a reason we come together and join together in the Eucharist. And so not only can you not have the Eucharist if you're watching it on television, but there is something about coming together in community, being together in prayer, strengthening that, realizing that you are one of many. I mean, the church is universal. And so I think even our younger priests recognize there's a place for technology, but we don't want it to replace everything that we do.
Right.
And we never want to get rid of this, right? But boy, isn't it great when Aunt Susie has died and Uncle Pete's in a nursing home and he can't be at the funeral. And he can watch it. He can be there. And he can grieve with his family and pray with the family. Those are all pretty incredible things.
That's an incredible thing. And I've had actually people come up to me after streaming a funeral and say, thank you so much for doing this. And it doesn't occur to me it doesn't seem out of the ordinary to me because I've done it for so long.
Yeah.
But they really appreciate that connection. They say, they got to participate virtually where they couldn't be here personally.
Right. And for every occasion, Mark.
And for every occasion. Yeah, it's not just funerals,
so
it's
joyful,
weddings.
It's weddings,
it's happy,
it's baptisms,
absolutely.
it's all of that.
Absolutely. And I know for a fact, because I did it for my wife's, that it was nice to have people that were unable to attend to be able to see. So it does build community. And there's an aspect of it that I'm going to touch on with you too, and there's also a financial aspect too, because obviously having parishioners at church, they're contributing, they're supporting their parishes. Have you found that it's a challenge for fundraising? It's a challenge for supporting the parishes when parishioners are not physically at church?
Almost just the opposite.
Do you think it's different?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
As much as technology helps us with getting our message out, technology also helps us with contributions. So you can do electronic giving. So many parishes were doing that before. That's the other thing the pandemic did, is for those who didn't have electronic giving, on the website we created a listing of the parish, and you could contribute to that parish for those who hadn't set up a system yet. Because there's still a number of parishes who don't do electronic giving. But for those at home, we even find that non-parishioners, if you will contribute if it's mentioned, in the masses. So it's part of the times, and if they're welcoming us into wherever they are, and they're enjoying what they see, they want to support it. And so I think we probably could do a better job in helping the parishes who aren't doing that, and we will be doing that. But I find that if you're giving something, if people feel fed, if you will, faithfully fed, they want to contribute. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know, because it would seem counterintuitive almost, because the old adage of, I'm parish pew rent. There was an old saying that somebody would say, I'm renting this seat.
That's right.
And you're sitting in my seat. Well, no. Right. But the idea is that do they physically have to be there to support their parish? And what you're saying, and I'm glad to hear that, is that it's not necessarily the case.
No, but it's funny. It's a non-technology piece, a little off topic for you, but
that's okay.
During the pandemic, and when we slowly came back, churches did not return to the usher passing the basket or having. And that hurt parishes. So and it really wasn't because people they didn't want to give; they just forgot. So if there was a basket in the door, right? Yeah. And so number of parishes have returned, including mine. My parish just returned to doing the basket, and we've already seen an increase. It's like
such a simple thing. You wouldn't imagine that would be the stopgap between contributing and not contributing. Physically having a basket in front of you to remind you to give. Right. But I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit here to obviously there's good, but there's also things that can be not so good. And one of the things that occurred to me is, how do we continue to use technology to advance and align with the values of the diocese? And what I mean by that is, people tend to get isolated very easily nowadays, especially since the pandemic. I think it brought into focus how people are really, they thrive on interaction and community. Yeah. Do you think that technology and use of shut-in masses or use of social media is helping bridge that gap a little bit?
I think I could answer it either way, honestly. It really depends on the populations. Technology has been so incredibly helpful to us, and I think a component of the technology that we can't forget is in whatever we do, when we're talking to people and it's through this mode, right, this medium, is always invite them in, invite them to something, bring them back, show them, if you can, bring them back into the pews where they used to sit and invite them to sit with you, and those kind of things. Really, technology should be the frosting on the cake, if you will. And it certainly is necessary for people who cannot leave their homes. But for everybody else, it really should be an extra. It should be something that is supplementing what you're doing in terms of this one-on-one engagement or the community engagement. And I think we forget, even I forget, when we're doing certain messages, and who's really good at it is the bishop. He'll invite people in, come and see us, those type of things. And, those aren't just words. We really want people to come back. We want to see people face to face. We want them to contribute. And you feel better. You just feel better when you're around people.
I think it does, and I saw a little bit of that over the past, during the Lenten period when we were doing the Lenten speaking tour. I call it the tour because it covered a couple of parishes across the diocese. And one of the things that I was impressed with is the attention that's being given to, we can't just settle on our laurels. We can't just sit back and say this is the way we've always done things. We have to get outside of the mindset that, we're having a bake sale. Well, it's not just a bake sale. It's a chance for fellowship. It's a chance to reach out to the community. I think, I don't know if it was Father Celentano or Father Sight that mentioned, when you go to a bake sale, bring a couple of people that maybe aren't in your parish with you and have them participate with you, because that's where fellowship grows. Right. It's bringing outside people out from outside your community into your community and showing them, hey, we're normal people. We're not hurt you. We're not going to do anything that's, uncomfortable. We're just, having a good time. We're enjoying our company. Yeah. And I think that's what I learned most from it is let's get beyond this thing of always doing it a certain way and grow our fellowship and get outside of that, tight-knit community that we have.
Isn't it exciting to go somewhere and do it different than you do, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the best thing in the world when you're going somewhere and, some of the fundamental things might be the same, so you know what you're doing. I mean, if we're talking about, a Mass itself.
Right.
So you go and, of course, the order of the Mass remains the same, but how people do it, how they express it, how they share it are very different. And same thing with, the potluck dinners and all sorts of things that they have in the
coffee hour or
coffee
something
hour,
like that.
donut hour, any of those things. I go to a church where there's a Hispanic community. My gosh, Mark, the life they bring to the church.
Wow.
And so much centers on prayer and food.
Prayer and food.
It's prayer and food, and they celebrate everything. They love life, and they celebrate it, and they're always, this Saturday we're doing this, or we just had a picnic outside, and then I'm sure by the next, they always have once a month birthdays for the Hispanic community and come together with food, and it's fabulous food, right? So it's just, every community is different, and they have their unique, sets and skills and talents, and don't be afraid. Jump in.
I think so, and I think it's a great way for other people, like you just said, to have them see what maybe a different parish approaches maybe their fellowship or their community a little differently. That kind of gets to the question. I think we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier about how balancing traditional versus the newer technologies for keeping the members engaged and included. Do you feel that there is more that we can do? Do you think there are technologies that we haven't really taken advantage of to continue that mission? I
think for sure, and it really depends on the parish and the diocesan offices too. We're certainly not taking advantage of all that we can do, and there is a balance. You talked about balance earlier. So I think some people get oversaturated, and you have to figure out how much information is coming at them. But you also have to realize that one approach doesn't work anymore. We grew up in the age when there were 3 TV stations, and you made an appointment to watch the news, right? So that's what you did. You sat down at 6 o'clock and you sat down at 11 and you watched the news. It's very different now. But at the same regard, you have to recognize each and every platform that's out there and every modality and say, who's your audience for that? And it's going to be a mixed audience. So even with the church bulletin, you're never going to get rid of the paper bulletin, right? People covet that bulletin, and they read it during Mass when they shouldn't, right? But there's also the electronic bulletin. So if you've missed or you want to go back, our parochial vicar put out an email request and said, if you want the bulletin, it's not through one of the liturgical companies. We're a smaller church. So he does his own bulletin. He said, if you want to email to you, let us know. So those kind of things. But then there's also just weekly communications from the parish. That's not a bulletin, but it keeps people up to date on, did you remember we're doing this Bible study? Did you remember that we're going on a field trip to this whatever? So you have the flock notes or the constant contacts or those kind of things. A tool to, I think, keep track of people would be very helpful for parishes. And by that I mean, what are their milestones?
Right.
What do we celebrate with them? What do we, sometimes when a couple has a baby and you baptize the baby, they're forgotten and they don't come back until it's First Communion.
Right.
What if you had nice little communications
Keep doing it.
at very important times leading up to that point, inviting people back, having a mentor that emails them or gives them a text. There's really some really cool things we could be doing, and we'll get there. And some parishes are farther ahead than others, but we'll never be at a loss and say, we've done it all, Mark, we're done. We'll never be at that point. So.
And that's the challenge. And there also is a challenge too, and I know specifically because I've done a lot of reading on how, there's a downside too to having constant interaction, because there's negatives too. There's whole stories of bullying and negative use of social media. Is there anything in place within the diocese to help, especially at the schools, at the level where they're becoming engaged with social media at a higher rate, where we can, instill in them the proper use of social media and the respectful use of it? Because it's great when you can get that fix, but it's also something that can be used as a negative tool as well.
Definitely. So in all of our schools, there are presentations offered on an ongoing basis about social media, the things to pay attention to, the risks of it, how to be a nice person on social media, all of those kind of things, when to shut down.
Right.
If you're watching the news right now, the Surgeon General said there should be a warning. And because of all the nastiness that you're talking about. And just realizing that so many of the things that people are posting aren't necessarily reality. Right? They can change, alter. We talked about that off camera. You can change and do all sorts of things to yourself. And then if you're somebody watching it and you may have your own issues and you say, why can't I be like that person? Right? When it isn't really real. So, which also gets to the importance of doing this, sitting down with people, being one-on-one. But also in our schools, there's a great thing called Go Guardian, and it's a technological tool that all of our schools have placed, because everybody's using a Chromebook now in our school. And laptops. Bishop Grimes is an Apple school only. There are no textbooks. Wow. So this tool is a way that administrators, teachers, and parents, if there is anything that should be considered risky behavior, looking at pornography, bullying somebody, looking into suicidal tendencies, all of those things, that's an alarm button and goes to the administrators, and you would be amazed at what has taken place and the good conversations. And that's a tool. That's a technological tool. So those are good things.
Tools, like I said earlier, can be used for good and bad.
Yeah,
so and a lot of that is it. I know that we kind of touched on a little bit about the challenges maybe facing the integration of technology and social media. Do you feel that there are things that we can do, or that the diocese can do, to leverage even more so the social media and internet into the growth of the diocese? Are there things that we can do specifically that...
Training,
okay.
Yeah. If you look at our demographics in the parish level, at the leadership, et cetera, it's older.
Right.
And even getting beyond the fear component, it's that, how could I possibly do it?
Right.
And so trying to help parishes train the right people, but always have an eye towards who's here who might be somebody who could step up and almost like a company, do succession planning for your communications and bring people on board. And then at the diocesan level, we're returning to a parish communication day. So kind of highlighting what are some of the things being done locally that work and connecting those people, so you can just call the parish next door and say, how did you do that? And it's okay. And trying to give the right resources for folks. Because we're never quite up to snuff on what's the latest and the greatest thing, right?
And that's the challenge. And I noticed, there can be variation across the diocese, across from parish to parish. My home parish, St. Joseph the Worker, they were doing some streaming masses, and then it just got to be too burdensome for them. And we're running into that issue. You know this from just the past few years, that there are staffing concerns. There are issues with just being able to do the most basic things and continue to do those consistently, let alone bringing this other element into the picture of social media. And, the mindset can very easily fall back into the old way of doing things, where you say, well, you know what? If we don't do the live streaming masses, that'll encourage people to come to church again.
I've heard that very phrase.
I've heard that. And I said, well, here's the thing. You're doing that with the hope that your parish community is going to come back to church. What if they don't? So you're severing a whole line of communication in favor of a traditional mindset versus a new mindset. So that kind of gets to my question: Is there a plan? Is there a mission for the diocese going forward to see if there can be some level of consistency across the different parishes, or is that just a very big nut to crack under the circumstances?
I'll be honest, that's a huge nut.
It sounds like it. It does.
People have a tendency to think that parishes are like corporate McDonald's.
Right.
And they're not.
No.
Every parish has different leadership, has a pastor and a pastoral team who are very different.
Right.
And there are basic rules that they have to follow. Obviously, what I talked about before, canon law, there's, you have to follow those. There's liturgical things you have to follow, which maybe aren't always followed, and some other things. So it's really hard to have conformity, I guess. So some things will always look the same and then feel the same, the order of the Mass, etc. But beyond that, it really comes down to what resources do they have and can keep up. So I think we do a much better job in explaining what our expectations are and helping them reach those expectations. But it doesn't mean that they're all going to be the same. And the more that we can do to have parishes help each other, we will be, I think, stronger and better because we will have fewer parishes. The Northeast is changing. And so with that, we have fewer priests. But the happy news of all of that is, what do you see? You see a surge of lay people coming in and saying, I could help with that. And we train them and make them a part of that team. So I don't think you'll ever see uniformity, if you will.
It's challenging.
But there is unity. And you know that you'll go into a Catholic church and you will have certain things for sure. And if you're a very well-populated, well-supported parish, you may have all the bells and whistles. But you know what? Some parishes that have all the resources don't have the bells and whistles in their parish. They choose to bring it out to the community and serve in different ministries. So that's a little bit of the beauty of the church, I think. So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. I know we've covered a lot here. It's wonderful to hear the community building and the fellowship that's going on. I think that sometimes doesn't get enough press.
I agree.
We tend to be focused on what pushes the media's dialogue or what they want to get out there. But it's good to have an opportunity to express what we're doing as a diocese and getting it out to the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having
Appreciate
us. I hope
it.
we can come back at some point and tell you some new news.
I think so. Thanks again.
And I'd like to thank Danielle Cummings for joining me on the show this week. Now, don't forget, you can stay connected with us in many ways. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Now, don't forget, click subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.